How's it going, everyone? Session here. Welcome to Final Fantasy XIV. We are officially 24 hours away from the reveal of the Japan keynote for Fanfest for Dawn Trail. And obviously, this is where all of the big, juicy details come into play for everything that's remaining for the game to come this upcoming summer of 2024. Now, of course, everyone's got their own ideas, their own predictions. Everyone's trying to figure out what's going to be announced at FanFest. And they think that, of course, they always save Japan FanFest for all of the best details for the game in terms of what's to come in the new expansion. Now, obviously, so far, we've gotten the reveal of the area that we're going to, kind of the lore connection for what it boils down to. We've also gotten the reveal of the most recent melee job out of the two DPS, the Viper, which is a awesome looking job. On top of that, they also did I guess it's like a collaboration, if you will, with the Final Fantasy XI series, where the Alliance raid will kind of stem towards that series quite a bit. And of course, we do know that there are a lot of other things coming to the game as well. Now, of course, I think for the simple sake of everything with Dawn Trail, usually the Japan Fan Fest is when they reveal the second job that's coming into the game, which will be a caster. People are speculating that it will be Green Mage. I don't know if it'll necessarily be called Green Mage, but it might be Green Mage similar because it is a caster DPS. I don't know. I think that they're going to be doing something that's similar to what they did with Viper as well as Reaper, where it's like classified as an original job, but it has some type of similarity to like the lore of the Final Fantasy universe. Now, Reaper and Viper are two jobs that have never really been seen in the previous Final Fantasy game. And I mean, Viper has a similarity where the weapon is dual wielded swords, which makes total sense, and that's really cool. But it's not really often that we've seen a job where it has two swords that combine together. We've seen that concept, of course, in previous games, but this is the first time that it's being showcased in Final Fantasy XIV history. So Viper is a really cool job. Now, like I said, for caster, I don't know. I think I'm hearing Green Mage. I'm hearing something with painting because everyone's like trying to figure out the shirt that Yoshi P wore at the American Fan Fest where he had the TMNT on and there was like a splotch of paint in the back. People are thinking Painter is going to be the other job or Pictomancer, whichever are the ones you might want to call it. I don't currently know what the exact job will be. I am going to speculate that it's just Green Mage, but I think that it'll be a different name to Green Mage. So we'll see kind of what kind of comes into play as we dive into it a little bit with time passing by, and of course, like we'll get a sense of it as well. Now, with that being said, as well, because we're going to get the second job being revealed, there will also, as they announced at the European Fan Fest, we're getting a third job actually, but it's not going to be a third job that you may be traditionally like familiar with. It'll be a second limited job, very similar to Blue Mage. And essentially, that job will have its own separate kind of content, similar to Blue Mage with the Carnival. There's probably a different acquisition thing. Like with Blue Mage, you fight monsters in the wild, the monsters will drop spells, and you fight bosses and that whole spiel. I'm assuming that it'll be similar to that with the second limited job. The thing is that it won't be similar to Blue Mage, right? I think everyone is really hoping that it's Beastmaster. They were screaming that during the European Fan Fest, right? So Beastmaster was like the job that everyone was waiting for. Now that it got like an announcement that there is a third job coming out and it is a second limited. So I don't know if Beastmaster is the job either. I keep on thinking that it might have something to do with the minions. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, obviously, because we already have it's a gold saucer event, right? Where you can use minions and stuff like that. But I feel like a minion thing would also be a pretty cool way to implement like something kind of like a Pokemon style gameplay. But again, it's kind of hard to throw that idea out there and then not make it seem as if it's a possibility or not. So I have no idea currently, but I think everyone's really hoping for Beastmaster. I don't know if I really, to me it doesn't matter all too much. I'll play the job regardless and I'll level it up. My only hope is that with now that there's Blue Mage and this second limited job, the theory that I predicted was that it was going to be a job that is not another DPS. Because right now, Blue Mage is classified as a DPS in the game, even though it's able to use an ability called Ethereal Mimicry and kind of copy itself into other roles. But right now, the actual role color of the job doesn't change, right? So you got Blue Mage and you use Mimicry on like a tank, the icon doesn't change blue and you're like a tank, right? You're technically still a DPS, but you just can do tank based abilities, which is cool. Now, I'd like for this second limited job to be revealed tomorrow, and I'd like for it to be either a tank or a healer, because that means that in the next expansion, far in the future from now, we're gonna get a third limited job, and it's gonna fill whatever remaining role we don't have out of the three. So, like, if tomorrow it's a tank, that means that the third limited job will guarantee be a healer, and then they'll kind of extend it in that way, shape, and form, and then we'll have it separated like that. Which I really think that that'd be really cool. So we'll see how that kind of comes to play with. Now, with the keynote as well, they always save the actions and abilities and traits of all of the jobs for the keynote. So we're going to get that revealed tomorrow as well. So we'll get to see all of the jobs, if there are any changes, if there's any gauge meters that are added as well, changed or implemented. We'll see that for Viper. We'll see that for the Green Mage, assuming it's Green Mage, and as well as any other jobs that are present as well in the current game. Now, we're also aware that Dragoon and Astrologian are two jobs that were supposed to get a rework earlier in the expansion of Endwalker, but in order to facilitate the transition into Dawntrail, they're just implementing the change into Dawntrail for those two jobs with the release of Dawntrail versus having to, force you to rework it into a new playstyle for those two jobs. So we'll see what that looks like as well, especially for tomorrow, because I don't think the job gauges will change for both of them, because the way how they explained it is that with Astro and Dragoon, both jobs are going to get a change similar to what happened with Ninja. Now, to make it very simple, Ninja got a change where you used to use your jutsus, like your Kaiten and your Raiton and Suiton and those moves. They were OGCDs, so you would use a GCD and you would use those abilities in between them, and then they connect to your second or third GCD and so forth and so on. They just put it on the GCD, so now it's a GCD to actually use Raiton or Suiton and that sort of thing. I'm assuming that they're going to do the same thing with Dragoon, where not every single jump will be in GCD, but the most common jump, which is called high jump or just jump, that will become a GCD. I think additionally, there's another one called Spine Shadow Dive that would, I'm assuming that may also, I mean, actually, no. Now I think about it, I think it'll stay as an OGCD because there's charges for it. I feel like it wouldn't make sense to, well, it kind of depends because I mean, Ninja also like is in the same boat. Ninja's GCDs, you can do it twice and it's a GCD. So I think Spine. No, I'll stick with what I said. I think Spine Shadow Dive will also become a GCD. However, there is one called Dragon Fire Dive. That's like the level 50 skill. I think that will be an OGCD. I think it'll stay that way. And additionally, when you enter Life of the Dragoon, which is the red form, if you will, when you can use like Nestron after using your Skogul, you have a move called Star Diver that will also remain a GCD. So I don't think that all of the jumps will become GCDs. I think that'll stretch the way that the job functions too much. So uh, it'll just only take one ability or two and just turn them into GCDs. With Astro, I think that's the more complicated one. Astro right now is in a position where it has too many buttons that you use on OGCDs versus, and then you catch those in between. Right now with White Mage, when it comes to using its strongest spell and also its burst healing spells, those spells are on its GCD. It doesn't really use it on an OGCD platform. There is a couple of abilities that you can use, but it's obviously important for Astro to feel a little bit more, I guess, easier on the hands for people who play White Mage and Astro, because the difficulty of playing both jobs spikes significantly in comparison. And I think that's the problem. So if it's able to at least have a little bit of less bloating when you're pressing your buttons to do your abilities, Astro might be more comfier. I think the way that they'll actually apply that is, you have right now you have a button called Draw, and then you have another button called Play, and then you have Minor Arcana. Now, I think that Draw might just combine itself with Play. So you press Draw and Play frequently. Now, I don't know how that's going to implement itself, because obviously, like, you want to be able to have, the way how Astro works right now is like you have three cards that you can eventually use, and then you can use an ability called Astrodyne. I think the problem is that there's too many buttons that force you to like play cards. I think that's the issue. So I don't. I think it's that, and There's also another move that you acquire at level 50 that I don't honestly see frequently used. I know it's a good ability. It's called Sinistry. It's a good ability. I just don't see it frequently used. I don't know if they'll necessarily take it out or if they'll like, upgrade it or something of that nature. It's kind of hard to know for sure. But what they could do is just with healers especially, they've been obviously getting upgrades on like their dots and like their power spells, but it would be ideal, I think, for them to start having abilities kind of have like a multitude of effects. So like with Gunbreaker, and like Warrior and Paladin, like they're like their short cooldown abilities. Now they do like a multitude of things. I think it's time for healer to have a little bit of a similarity in that regard. However, that's going to also make them pretty strong just alone with that kind of power. So, but again, that being said, though, that's kind of talking about all of the healers together versus you know, just the Astro alone. So to bring it back with Astro, I think they're going to just change how the cards get played, and they might also remove an ability or two just to add some space for the abilities to come for Dawn Trail. Now, with all that being said, we're going to get the second job. We're going to get the ability listing. We might get a lot of more lore in terms of the game with Terral and us going over to that area and figuring out what's going on, right? One and to kind of wrap it up in a little bow with the job system, at least, they made a very strong point that the key components of a character who's obviously had their presence in the game but needs a little bit of more of a presence is Kryl. And people are heavily speculating that she will be the caster job that gets announced tomorrow during the JP trailer, and that makes a lot of sense to me as well. So I can totally see that being a thing, because she's also always been kind of like a caster role to a degree. I think she's always been a bit of a conjurer though, not necessarily like a DPS. So I think she'll fall into a similar boat where Y'shtola was a white mage in the early expansions, and then going into Shadowbringers, she became a black mage. I think that Cryo will get the same touch, where she was a conjurer slash white mage, and then she'll become a caster DPS, and then she'll be able to go on the offensive with the Warrior of Light, which would be really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Now, content wise, I think that there's a lot of things that are being discussed that are going to be implemented into Dawn Trail. Dawn Trail is expected to have the most amount of content ever in every expansion in the game's history. So like for example, there were like I think people usually say that Stormblood is the best content that was packed with content to do. Although it wasn't everyone's favorite story. Dawn Trail is projected to have a great story and also have more content than Stormblood did. And I think it's because there will be two ultimates, which would be cool. I'm looking forward to those. I'm currently plugging them myself, and I'm really loving ultimate content more than I ever have before. And of course, the raid system. And even further beyond that, we have ourselves another type of Bojin or Eureka based content. There's also going to be deep dungeons introduced, and there's also a new 4-player content that has never been like seen before, and separate from Criterion, because we'll also get Criterion dungeons. I think they're testing. I think they used Endwalker a bit to experiment with a lot of content that they wanted to bring into the game, and I think they're going to redefine it further into Dawn Trail. So we'll see what that looks like for us as well. I do believe that with Dawn Trail, it's expected to have, like I said, a lot of content, and I think that they're going to continue to push that with us as well. Um, because everyone's really looking forward to just seeing what there is to bring. And I don't think that they're really going minimal on it as well, especially because of considering that one of the biggest changes that they're implementing, there's actually two of them, is they're actually doing like a graphics overhaul. It's looked small so far over the course of their keynotes because they've been giving us small little demonstrations about what they're doing, but I think that it's actually much larger than it's realized, just because like the game is 10 years old. It hasn't been updated graphically for 10 years. So it's getting the first graphics update ever. And on top of that, they're introducing the ability for you to dye pieces of gear with two colors instead of just a singular color change, which is incredible. And I think that they're going to be, because of the graphics update, they're going to be implementing that for every gear piece that's available in the game that can be dyed. So it's not going to just be a limited amount of gear. I think it's going to be applied to all of the gear in the entire game. They only gave us a small demonstration with the Endwalker White Mage chess piece, from what I remember, and I think it was a monk piece. But the White Mage piece was the most like recognizable and memorable because it's a white and red coat, or it's a white coat with red details, and they actually flipped the color, and it was a red coat with white details, and people were amazed by that because if you play White Mage or you put that coat on, you would know that you couldn't change the red, and it was a really weird detail. So when people saw that that was the case, everybody was freaking out, which I thought was really cool. So that graphics update will be definitely one of the biggest changes. The second change is them trying to port this like cloud data server implementation. I think that because the game being what it is for as long as it has been, the formula hasn't really needed all too much changes in terms of like the server data stuff. They just bought like more servers and had more spacing, and the population of the character and player count has increased dramatically over the years. So with the cloud data server, their goal is to not basically do what they did with Endwalker, where there was like a 21,000 queue. I'm sure people have seen that meme in the internet, like up and about. It was really bad to get into Endwalker. I would say from my own experience, when I woke up at 4 in the morning in EST, I tried to get in. It took me an hour to get in, and the game was packed with players. Obviously, everyone was so excited to play Endwalker, myself included. So I did like the overnight wake up ordeal, and I loved it. I'm not going to do that this time with Dawn Trail, but I definitely would like for them to make sure that the players who are going to be doing that won't run into any kind of like crazy server issues. And the cloud data center that was been tested over the course of time with the different regions have been very successful as far as I've been aware. So I think that they're going to be really excited to kind of reduce that player count blow of queuing into the servers by quite a significant amount. So we'll look into that for sure. Now, in terms of content as well, there is like this raid system that we got going on. Now, with the North American Fanfest, there was no like side content announced. They primarily just announced that there was going to be two jobs. I think they also announced the ultimate situation. Or it was the European one. I don't exactly remember, but we are getting the raids. The raids, lore wise, will be announced tomorrow. Now I don't know exactly what it might be because with Endwalker we had Pandemonium, right, based off of the Ancients, which is really cool, and I loved it. It was incredible raids here. Uh, Especially with the ultimates kind of following suit after that. So the raids here will be announced as well tomorrow. I have not a single clue I can't even guess what I think it'll be. I think people were under the impression that because Final Fantasy XI is going to be the Alliance raids, that even the Alliance raids, well, sorry, the normal raids will also, and Savage raids will be also FF related, or sorry, FF11 related. Now, I don't know though, because the problem is that recently they've been doing a really good job of like collaboration stuff. So, we had the Fall Guys collaboration, which was really cool. Previously, prior to that, we had like the Monster Hunter Rathlos trial. We've also brought back some of the other events that we've had. We've got the upcoming FF16 event to come. So I feel like the raid tier has never had a collaboration, as far as I'm aware. Um, they've been obviously like just related to bosses that we've seen over the history of Final Fantasy's like life cycle, but also the Endwalker raids. All the bosses were kind of original based with respect to the ancients. I think now is the time, expansion wise, where they could incorporate a raid system that is a collaborative system. Which collaboration though, I have no idea. So I would just take a guess and say like it'll also either be Final Fantasy 11 related, or it'll kind of have like a wink nudge nudge to a another Final Fantasy game that we have obviously seen and are looking forward to have kind of be incorporated into the game as well. Now, that being said, I think the last few minute touches that we'll look into as well going into the keynote is simply that there will be more graphics things introduced. And I think on top of that as well, there is going to be a lot of other quality of life features or key features that they've talked about that they can't really divulge too much into. There is a lot of things that they've mentioned that they're looking to bring to the game. And I think they've given us very, very minor hints about it in the first two keynotes. This one will be the one where we actually get to see what those details are about. So we'll see. Now, if I had to have like a praying of the gods like hopium request, I think I've got three. First one, with the graphics update and the overhaul for all that stuff, I would like for them to basically go back and look at the other ultimates that we've had previously and just give the jobs that came out after those ultimate releases weapons to acquire. Very simple put, like, like I'm now turning into a tank main, so like, and I love Gunbreaker, favorite tank, but I can't get like a UCOB or an Uwu weapon in Gunbreaker, right? If I could have like a please request, it'd be that. I want the, because same thing with Reaper, and I'd like for Reaper to have like a T weapon and a UCOB weapon and an Uwu weapon, right? Because when Viper and the other caster comes out, they're not going to have any weapons from any of the previous ultimates for the past like 5 fights, which I think is really, it's kind of weird. I'm not really too sure if I like that. I'd like for them to actually figure out a way to incorporate that. Secondly, and I think this is kind of like a smaller detail, it's not too important to me, but I'd like it. So right now, with the limited jobs kind of being implemented, they're usually 10 levels behind. So like when the Doncho releases, the max level job will be 100. I think that Blue Mage and the second job will be eventually, let's say capped at 80, and then eventually go up to 90, but they won't go to 100. I'd like for them to try to figure out a way to incorporate it so that they all can be 100. I think that would be something that I personally really enjoy. And lastly, and I think this is a little bit of a weird one as well, because again, I think that this limited job thing is interesting to me, and the fact that they're making more of them, it's just a really unique position for the jobs to have. I'd like for the limited jobs to start getting content that's similar to the main content, but isn't uh traditionally like for example, like with Blue Mage, there is achievements that you can get, and like titles and mounts and whatever for doing the raid tier content, right, with Blue Mage, like synced midnight level, no echo, that whole spiel. That's really cool, and I like that. I'd like for there to be a button that toggles that, right? But also, I'd like for the limited jobs to just get their own type of content that is exactly the same thing as like a raid tier, because it's, again, with that in mind, again, I'm dipping my toes into these ultimates much more frequently than I ever have, and I'm loving them. But like, I don't have a Blue Mage ultimate, right? Or the second limited job ultimate. Like, I'd like for them to just get their own ultimate. Now, if we have two ultimates coming out with Dawn Trail, I do not want one of those two to be for Blue Mage. Absolutely not. I think that we will get two, right? I think if you follow the sequence of events, right, I think it'll be Shinryu and Eden. Eden, I think, is a given for sure. I don't know about Shinryu though. I think people are trying to bounce around the idea that it's not Shinryu, but either way, I'd like for there to be those two ultimates, and then I'd like for Blue Mage to get like its own some kind of content that is like an ultimate, or even yet, I'd like for Blue Mage to just get its own like deep dungeon. That sounds really weird, but I feel like it'd be really cool. Um, because it's not gonna make Blue Mage feel like the real like black sheep that it is. Because like Blue Mage has its own content, but it's still very limited in what it can do, hence the name. So I'd like for them to try to expand on that limitation that the Blue Mage has, just because it's it's got that one piece of content that they crack at every now and then. And I think that because they're done with some of the other things that they were working on, such as like the main scenario, like MSQ, catch up flow where you can play the game single player wise, I think that they're done with that for now. So now you can play every single expansion first player or player one style, right, until you get to like certain raids or trials, which is cool. Now that that's done, I think they can put the time of that now into doing some kind of content for the Blue Mage, and also for a second limited job as well. Because if they announce a second job and it is going to be as big as it seems in comparison to Blue Mage, then it's going to have its own piece of content. But now there's also content that both of those jobs can bring to their own little corner of content, if you will. And I think them getting not their own raids here, because that would be way too much, but for them to just get at least some piece of content that you can do with 8 players that's not that's different from the content you can do, generally speaking. That's what I would pretty much request. Again, I'm asking. It's not. It's probably like one of the weird things to ask, but it's what I would like for them to do. So we'll see. Obviously, we've got very little time between now and then to figure out all this stuff, and they're gonna just dump it all on us, and we're gonna have to just accept it and be really excited for what is to come. So I'm super excited. I can't believe it's already gonna be happening tomorrow. I feel like it was just like yesterday we had the European announcement with all of this stuff coming, and the fact that we're going to be actually getting the Japan version of it all is going to be very insane. I might just go to sleep for the next like 12 hours and just wake up and then you know what I mean. So we'll see. But thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm also very curious to see what people think. I know that there's people who know a lot more about the lore and like what's the come and speculating better than I have. I don't care what it is. I'm just excited for all of it regardless. But like I still would love to know what people think. So take care.